was a big undertaking. You'll see a little bit about why that was the case, but one that ultimately turned out to be really satisfying and rewarding to do. That I think sets the path for how we, at least significant parts of how we want to do Comm Academies in the future. But this was the first time we did it this way. So let's talk about who we are. Ian and Ethan were responsible for a lot of the magic that we're going to talk about today. Lots of relevant background for those guys. But why don't I just take a second. Ian, why don't you say hello and a couple words about, maybe what brought you to this, and then Ethan, same thing, and then Catherine and I will do that next.
Sounds good. Give me a quick audio check.
Sounds great.
Alrighty. So my name's Ian Gallagher. I'm KE7MAP, and myself, along with the whole team here, located in Seattle, Washington. And you'll also see another pattern is we are all active Seattle ACS volunteers, and that is the Seattle Auxiliary Communication Service. It's the volunteer arm of our city's Office of Emergency Management, and it's how they have amateur radio operators help and volunteer with all their emergency response, and obviously communications are a big part of that. And that also gets into kind of how we got involved with Comm Academy. The team that has been running Comm Academy for the past 2 decades is very ingrained with Seattle ACS. Some of the leadership there, in particular, Mark Shepard, who is the director, at the time, director of Seattle ACS. He reached out to us to help do this virtual event, and he's been a huge influence. He just recently stepped down from being the director of Seattle ACS, but still has a lot of involvement with Comm Academy. And so it's his fault that we all got involved here and got into to Comm Academy. So for Seattle ACS, myself and Ethan also maintain like the technical systems for members there. A lot of the same stuff that we actually use for behind the scenes with Comm Academy, and we'll get into that later, so I don't need to go into that too much. We also co-founded CascadiaRadio.org, which is a Slack workspace for amateur radio operators in the region. And we used that. We effectively we sponsored Comm Academy with that organization of ours, and we used that for chat within the event, which worked great. And I do all kinds of other stuff that is fun technology stuff. But I think that's probably a good summary for myself.
Sure. And whoops, let's see if I'm unmuted here. Can you hear me?
You sound good.
Okay. So I'll just give a really brief summary of myself. But Ian and I have very, I guess, similar skill sets in terms of what we applied for these events and for ACS, as he mentioned. I'm a nerd and do a lot of systems work. I also have like a kind of a split technology and design background. So, I used to work in advertising and design and photography. And I applied a lot of those skills, as you'll see later on, to this specific event. And I don't think I need to go into any more about myself at this point.
Very good. Thank you. And by the way, before we move off this slide, I will say that although Cascadia Radio has its center of gravity here in the Pacific Northwest, everybody's welcome. We have folks, especially once that became, one of the kind of vehicles for parts of Comm Academy, we started seeing folks from all over the place. But even before that, we did. So if you're interested in having a place to hang out and talk radio stuff, come to Cascadia Radio. Everybody's welcome.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. It's not a club. It's so we really do welcome folks to join and talk. It's a welcoming environment.
Yep. Cool. So Catherine, our planning section chief, why don't you say hello?
Sure. So hi, I'm Catherine, KJ7DYG. I'm probably the newest ham of our group and the newest ACS member. I have a background as a scientist and project manager, and have been recently excited about learning more about exercise design and execution and evaluation, which is how I got roped into helping with the evaluation unit and then the planning section. But it was a great team to work with, and I'm excited to share it with you tonight.
We are so glad that Catherine was part of the team. We could not have done this without your work. So Hello, everyone. Tim Helming, WT1IM. I am the Public Information Officer for Seattle ACS as well as Comm Academy. And I've been a ham for close to 30 years, which I just can't even believe. But time flies when you're having fun, right? I do cybersecurity as my day job, but I've been very involved with Seattle ACS and other ham organizations throughout the years, and especially with a special intensity probably over the last 5 years or so. So that's your crew that did the majority of the heavy lifting for making Comm Academy happen. So let's talk about, how do you put on an event like this? Actually, you know, I realize now I should probably step back a second. And for anybody that's not familiar with what Comm Academy is, I don't have a history of Comm Academy slide here, but it was started by some of the leadership of Seattle ACS, as well as a team that's called the Western Washington Medical Services Communications Team, which deploys to hospitals and maybe some non-hospital medical facilities for communication support in the event that their comms go down in a disaster. Anyway, they decided we've got a lot of volunteers with a lot of enthusiasm and some good kind of raw skills and expertise, but without a lot of formal training in emergency communication procedures or the ICS or any number of other kind of ancillary skill sets that are really important to being an effective emergency responder, volunteer emergency responder. And so they decided to put on a training workshop that was called Communications Academy. Everybody just started calling it Comm Academy, so we eventually made that the official name. But the idea was take a weekend, bring in some folks who are pros in this field, who are, you know, emergency management professionals, first responders, et cetera, and put on some workshops by them as well as by experienced volunteers. Emphasis on radio communications, but that's not the whole thing. That's kind of the center of gravity, but not the entirety of what gets covered in Comm Academy. Anyway, that was an in-person event. The first one was in 1998. It was in Seattle, and it grew over the years. They did a really good job of attracting great speakers with a lot of knowledge to impart and a lot of enthusiasm about doing it. And there were workshops, there were hands-on things, there were cool communications vans parked outside that you could tour through in between the formal sessions and whatnot. And so Comm Academy grew, and it became something that eventually wound up drawing, I don't know, in the neighborhood of between 400 and 500 people for a weekend in the spring every year. And it's a great event, and people really came to anticipate it eagerly every year, and had a lot of return folks and whatnot. So then this pandemic thing happened and Comm Academy 2020 did not happen at all. There just wasn't enough time between when the pandemic became apparent as the severity that it really was, and the usual April timeframe for Comm Academy. So there was no Comm Academy 2020, and the question became, what do we do about 2021? And in the fall, the decision was made that we should put on a virtual Comm Academy, because nobody could foresee, how safe it was going to be, if at all, to have an in-person event in the spring of 21. Even the most wildly optimistic projections didn't really have that making a lot of sense. So we decided this should be a virtual event. And at the same time, we realized, well, if it's a virtual event, that doesn't mean it has to be limited to folks in the Pacific Northwest. So maybe this is an opportunity to put this kind of learning out there for a wide audience, pretty much unlimited, anyone with internet connectivity and interest. So the idea started to gel around the idea that we would do a weekend-long workshop online, entirely online, and then the team that is talking to you today, along with kind of a steering committee of folks who had been involved with Comm Academy over the years, started planning how this would all work. So the timeline that you see here, I'll just talk about some of the highlights. So this group, I think this was a little bit before Catherine came on board, but Ian and Ethan and I spoke to the steering committee back in October and gave a pitch, which was largely put together by Ethan and Ian, but with revised branding, revised website concept, and the overall kind of suggestions about how we would manage the online event. They went for it and gave their blessing, and so things started happening. So along the top, the bluish band at the top there is sort of Ethanville, and Ethan started working on the design, branding, website stuff, website overhaul. Ethan, do you remember what the date was that you actually put the new redesigned site live?
That's a great question. I actually don't. Ian and I worked really closely at all that. So right? yeah, it was probably.
If I had it in front of me, I know the master timeline actually has that as a line item in it, but off the top of my head, I don't quite remember. It was early in this year. It was early, probably February, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to jump in and say, Tim, like on the back of this particular moment that we're covering, like I don't know if people realize, like by like September, October, November, we had already put in so much work on this project because we pitched the team that had been running Comm Academy for 20 years as a bunch of noobs. And we were like, hey, yeah, let us do it. And like to convince them that we knew what we were doing, like we basically approached it like we were pitching a corporate client.
Yeah.
And we had we mocked up merch, we mocked up the website. So yeah, there was a ton of work at that point already.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. This timeline could really extend, to do it justice, would extend farther to the left from that 10/21/20
into infinity.
Yeah. I think actually I just looked, and the master timeline, we don't have it on there because it was so before we even had a concept of a timeline. But to give people an idea, to give people an idea, Comm Academy had just, it didn't have much of an internet presence at all beforehand. It was a very basic website that had the basic details of the event and archive material for each year. So there was that, but it design-wise was really not there. And it had actually completely atrophied over the last, since the last in-person event. And the people who maintained it didn't have access to update it. So we had to totally overhaul it. And
you guys have to renew the domain or something too?
Everything, renew the domain. We changed over the hosting, and it was a complete rehaul. And that was really done just before before we even could make a public statement that there was going to be another Comm Academy coming up.
Yeah, that's. Thank you for pointing that out. So yeah.
Oh yeah,
so
and we actually also had to do a full photo shoot for all the photos on the website.
Yeah, those aren't stock photos.
No, that was all from scratch.
That's Ethan. Yep. That's Ethan's work. Yep. So, and this timeline does not remotely cover everything, but I wanted to hit some of the major things. So yeah, so Ethan's work involved a lot of all the design stuff, branding, a lot of the look and feel of the website, all of that, and then for the presentations. Ian and Ethan worked out that the best way to handle that was going to be to pre-record the presentations, but then to have the speakers there live for Q&A. That reduced the worries about demo gremlins and speaker, things going sideways on the day of with people's connectivity or anything like that. It didn't rule out any technical glitches, but it just took some of them off the table. So Ethan spent a lot of time recording the presentations, editing the presentations. Before that, just chasing down the speakers and making sure everybody was, showed up when they were supposed to be recorded, and didn't have dinosaurs or pets in the background.
Yeah. Hey, listen, anybody out there who's thinking about doing a conference like this, I'm just going to tell you, don't have the guy who's editing all the videos also wrangle all the speakers, because it just turned out to be it was just huge amounts of work to actually get these folks on the line even though they were like committed and interested, it just is like herding cats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every
Totally.
everything is more work than you think it is going to
Yes.
be,
Yes.
without question. Ethan and I went into this thinking we were pretty smug, and we're like, oh yeah, we can be logistics and we can be operations. We don't need people under us. We got this. That is foolish. That was mistake number one. And I mean, we'll get into it, but Tim as well. He had the hat of just PIO, and we're like, hey Tim, do you want to be social media guy too? And he agreed. And then he turned into this personality for the event. So we're like, you should be an MC. And then we said, well, you need some more MCs, so you be the MC manager, and stuff like that. That the after action report we've identified, all of those things need to be distinct, basically jobs, and because they just take so much time, and so many of them kind of need to happen in parallel, and it gets hard to juggle stuff like that if you want to have a quality event.
Yep. No, all good points. So, and then by the way, the Ethan line at the top of the timeline here doesn't even have anything for the Big Red Star Comm Academy itself, but he'll tell you about that. He was kind of busy during the event itself, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The yellow line is Ian, and Ian, really, there's more stuff to the right of this accounts and admin groundwork and whatnot, because Ian was busy all the way through this also, but he was really instrumental in setting up a lot of the infrastructure that we used for this. We used Sked as the programming, the sort of conference schedule software. We used Eventbrite to manage the invitations and quote unquote ticketing for it, and for the email blasts out to the registrants and so forth. And then, as you'll see a little bit later, Ian was also, he was the failover site for the broadcast. So he had a sort of a replica of the same studio environment that Ethan had for the day of. Because the other thing, in addition to the Q&A from the presenters, the MCs, all of the intros and outros and all of that from the presentations themselves, all of that was live. So it was essentially a live broadcast that had some recorded chunks in it, was really what it amounted to. So more detail on that a little bit later. But then, so I'm kind of the green line here. I did publicity work early because I got real excited about this idea that, hey, maybe we can get a couple hundred people from outside of the Seattle area involved with this also. So, I started working on publicity. I do, in my cybersecurity work, I do a lot of evangelism and marketing type work and so forth. So that was applicable to what I was doing here for Comm Academy. And then a little bit later on in the process, also, as Ian mentioned, I recruited the rest of the cadre of MCs and did some prep work for them to get them ready for it and everything too. And then Catherine did way too many things for me to have even known what to. When I made this slide deck, I just, on the gray line there, it said Catherine did 10,000 things or something like that. So, but yeah, she was the person who at every meeting had, and we had weekly planning meetings for this from I don't know, December-ish on up until the event itself. She kept us on track as far as updating the deliverables that everybody was responsible for, and making sure that everybody had good situational awareness of what needed to happen next, what the status was of everything. That was vitally important. And so it may just be a few words there, timeline management and plans, but wow, there was a lot that went into that. So, and then she's put together the after action report, sort of spearheaded that as well. And we'll talk about that when we get later on in the slides here. So you can see the timeline. I'm not going to read through every event that has a dot or anything next to it, but a couple of the big ones were, well, the live audience test on March 20th. So that was where we found out whether the general concept of this was going to fly or not. And and it went really well. We had, I don't remember how many we had. Do you guys remember? We had, I don't know, a couple dozen people, maybe, something like
We had
that.
about 28 or 30 participants that were not familiar with anything. So they were just our people off the street. And then probably about a dozen, 13 people that had been volunteers and involved.
One of the things we wanted to do was make sure that we had a way to moderate the chat. We used the YouTube chat function during the live thing. And, when you get an unknown crowd of people together with chat, weird things can happen. So during the live audience test, my son made a cameo appearance as the troll. He was the guy that had to get thrown in the penalty box by the moderators. So that worked too. But, we were thinking of as many contingencies as we could possibly think of. What could go wrong? And let's test for what happens when that going wrong thing actually happens.
We were thankfully very overly worried about people having bad behavior on the internet for the event. And so we had a lot of controls in place to prevent that, because if you get one bad apple, they can just tarnish your image. And we really didn't want that to happen for our first event. But everything went great.
Yeah, that's right. And I, in retrospect, I wouldn't do it any differently. Like next year, I would want to have all the same levels because you never know. Like some year will be the year when that person shows up, and you want to be ready for it. But anyway, yeah, the live audience test went well. We made a few tweaks based on what we learned from that, but and then a lot of things happened between live audience test and Comm Academy weekend, but we don't have all day to talk about all the details. So anyway, this is the general timeline of it. And the last kind of event of Comm Academy 2021, so to speak, is the after action review that's going to happen this weekend. So some of the key participants, you've met a few of us today, but Peter Beck, who's very involved at Seattle ACS, also served as our incident commander, and his leadership was really valuable, among other things, just as kind of that steadying voice who was a little bit at a remove from all of the detail work. And that was very important because he had the big picture in mind. And he asked a lot of valuable questions. And I felt like we had just a great kind of backstop in having Peter there in case any of us, forgot something or whatnot. Then you've got the four of us who are talking today, and then our MC crew, who were a couple of them were ACS people. Alan and Kenna are ACS folks, and then a couple of other folks who are not ACS, but just did a great job. Jack Wolf and Morgan Davis. So we were very pleased with the MC crew that we had, and then. Ian mentioned Mark Shepard, who started Seattle ACS back in, I think, 1992. He and Marina Zutel from the medical services team, they were the visionaries, that really got this thing off the ground. So even though, Mark wasn't involved day to day as we prepped for this, there was so much, like his fingerprints are all over so much of what we did. And that whole old phrase about standing on the shoulders of giants. So, okay, so we are going to have this event. It's virtual. We're going to invite, what the heck, let's invite the whole world. So I did a bunch of work to try to get the word out about this thing. And, we went into it thinking if we can roughly approximate the same attendance that we had in person, we'll be doing fine. Like if we get 500 attendees, that's great. If we get any more than that, that's gravy. It'd be nice, but let's try to at least hit 500. So, there was a lot of, I reached out to all the different channels that I could kind of think of to get the word out to folks, including a lot of actual email. I handcrafted spam that I sent to all kinds of ARRL leadership and amateur radio clubs and so forth, and just telling folks about what this was that we were doing. I got onto a couple of podcasts, got on amateur radio newsline and whatnot, and then got the social media stuff happening to try to build up the communities around that as well. So anyway, there was, there was a significant effort toward publicity for this, but, it's shouting out into the void. I mean, you really don't know what kind of response you're going to get when you're doing something like this for the first time. So, we just tried a bunch of things, and, some of it seems to have worked. So, we have some stats about it that we'll talk about a little bit later on, but let's see, let me just check if we had like questions already at this point, because I think we're gonna, oh no, it looks like, yeah, we'll probably do more questions at the end. Yeah. Ian just mentioned something that I had forgotten to say. We did use the ICS, the Incident Command System structure for this. Some of you have picked up on that vocabulary, the logistics section, planning section, PIO, incident commander, et cetera. So we used ICS, and Catherine, maybe in a little bit, you can say a few words about that. But over to you, Ethan, to talk about some of the production stuff.
Sure. I won't mention too much about this, but we get a lot of questions about, well, how did you do this? How did you make this happen? And besides we're talking a lot about the structure and the marketing. In terms of the operations and production, like actually creating assets. So if you go onto YouTube and you watch these videos, you're going to see that we've got, nice audio in the beginning. We've got we've got some animated graphics. The audio throughout is audible and you can understand it. And none of that happened by accident. So basically, like every step of the way, like from the creation of the logo, which never existed before, on to the creation of the animated versions of the logo, onto the audio, onto like every pixel, like that all was touched and created from zero for this event. And those are assets that we now have sort of in the can. We can modify them for next year, but it was months of work. And basically, if anybody's interested in doing that, you need somebody who's good at Adobe, and like that's right. Basically
this isn't an ad for Adobe, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, and I have a love-hate relationship with that company. But I pay my Adobe tax every month for a reason, and that is because that software is industry standard for production software. So, Illustrator, you're making graphics; Photoshop, you're doing photos; Lightroom, we did photo shoots; Audition, like leveling the audio in every video. And this is something that we noticed a lot. We did a lot of review beforehand of previous online events, including ham events and other conferences. And one of the things that gets missed a lot, and we as ham operators should be thinking about this right away. What am I going to say? What's the answer? You should all know this right now. Audio. And, video is great. Video, you can have, the thing is, you can actually have terrible video online as long as you have good audio. And so I spent a ton of time cleaning up audio that I recorded from these random presenters all over the country. And who knows what microphone they had. Some of them had decent computers with terrible video cameras and okay microphones, but like that was the best case scenario. So cleaning up dogs barking in the background, all that kind of stuff. So that was production. I'm gonna now in terms of scene design and timing, we used OBS for that. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, when we come to the actual day of material.
Cool.
Oh, here we are at the day of material.
Yeah.
No, I won't go into this other than to say, Ian and I had basically the same setup. You can see me here. I'm cutting video. That's actually not the room that I was in. The room that I was in is where I'm sitting right now, and I've got a big, like, multiple monitors in front of me. We basically each had a small broadcast studio, and that includes things like a hardware switcher. Ian, maybe you can switch over to, I don't know if your view is better there, but you can see, so Ian's view there, my view here would be similar. We both have actual broadcast quality hardware that we use to switch between cameras, pipe audio feeds around, and this stuff gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So it's a kind of thing that you have to have a little bit of skill and experience doing. For broadcast software, though, we use something called OBS. I want to plug for that because it is free. It is open source. It is incredibly powerful. There's just a little bit of a learning curve, and a little bit. So Ian and I spent weeks sort of coming to terms with it and really dialing things in and making sure everything was queued up for day of.
One thing I'll add for OBS is it is a steep learning. It's actually not that steep a learning curve, but there is a learning curve. It's complicated software, or complex is probably the better word. But there is a just multitude of resources out there because it is the most popular piece of software for streamers. So people who stream their video games and stream, DJ sessions and stuff online. So there is just no end to YouTube video tutorials on how to use it. And that's great because anyone can start doing this and you don't have to talk to someone like us. You don't have to go through that Elm Ring process. There's lots and lots of available resources.
Very cool. So Ian, over to you.
Sure. All righty. So one thing I wanted to say as well from that timeline side, we don't have to go back to it, but another thing that I did before any of this could really get started was myself and Ethan also set up an entire Google Workspace account, which is formerly known as G Suite, for the Comm Academy organization. So we went through and made sure that we could get that with our nonprofit status for free. And that is huge. Everything we did to coordinate our work centered around it. We used Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, which is what we're looking at literally right now, and their email setup. So we had everything there coordinated so everyone could work really efficiently together. And that was key. And thankfully, it just falls into the background noise once it's there. But it's something that was really helpful. And if you don't have something like that and you're trying to run an event like this, just you'll have to put some extra thought into how you're going to collaborate with people. Are you going to use something like Google Docs still, or maybe Dropbox? But I think we can't speak highly, enough of the Google ecosystem for this use case. It was wonderful. In addition to that, for the participant experience, that was my main kind of like production aspect that I was working on. And so as mentioned, we used a platform called Sked, short for schedule. And that was the system that actually had the master copy of our event program. So information for all of our speakers, their bios, as well as the blurbs about all of their presentations. And it's a really fun platform. It's much more useful for in-person events that are traditional conferences where you have multiple tracks and such, because it lets you as a participant pick which sessions are most interesting to you, build out a customized schedule, and you can just use that to remember what room to go to for a given time slot. We wanted to use it for this event, even though we went for a simple single track online event, just to kind of get into it and kind of establish ourselves with it. And I think we're very happy with it, and it'll be 10 times more useful for going back to normal events as well. And then Eventbrite we used for our ticketing. For free events, it costs nothing, so that's great. And we used that so that we could have a stronger kind of collection of people's registration information, so we could keep in touch with them in particular and keep those emails going as we got up to the event. And then the Google stuff I already mentioned, and social media. I worked with Tim to get that stuff set up. So did Ethan, actually. But we wanted to make sure that we had a good social media presence on all the popular platforms. So we got a Twitter account, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Of course, YouTube, people sometimes forget that is kind of a social media platform. And for us, it's an important one, because that's where we were hosting our stream, and now all of our past content is there as well. So helped set that up, and Tim has been the man behind the messages, and it's been really great to have that grow there, and we've gotten a lot of interest from it. All right, so the event planning and scheduling, as I mentioned, the platforms we used for that, but it's also just making sure that all happened appropriately and at the right times. And then, as mentioned before, I was also that backup stream site. So in the case of Ethan's internet going out, or his house catching on fire during the presentation, or his wife just being sick of it all and throwing his computer out the window, which is probably the most likely option, I could have taken over. And we had a lot of fun actually designing the failover for that. I think we probably spent more time on that than maybe we should have, because it was fun and nerdy and exciting. But it was set up so that I was actually streaming out the entire event at the same time. So if his connection went off, it would seamlessly switch over to mine, which is just a little holding pattern. And then I would realize that and be able to sync us up and queue up the media that we are supposed to be at, and even potentially get the MCs on air so we can have proper continuity in case we need to. And we tested all that. A lot of people said, okay, you say you did this, but does that really work? And it's like, yep, we tested it many times. So
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Cool. So we've talked a bit about behind the scenes already, but Ethan, maybe you can go into a little more detail about some of the, like how we used Zoom, what we did on YouTube, et cetera.
Yeah.
It would all be great. And I forget, are you planning on showing the video? I think it would be great if we can, but we don't have to.
We can. I don't know how people feel about that. Ian,
Maybe
you have any thoughts?
you have a time check, maybe.
Yeah. I feel like we might be pushing our minutes here.
Yeah.
So real quickly, okay. So day of, right? I wake up. Let's not kid ourselves. I hadn't gone to sleep. Did not sleep the night before, basically. But I think I woke up at like 3 a.m. Went downstairs, checked connectivity. But we basically started the stream the night before, just sort of as a holding pattern. There's a live countdown on the screen. So people who came early or were confused, because we had, again, these are people coming from all over the world. And, you say Pacific time and they're like, who knows what they're thinking. So we wanted to make sure that we had information on the screen all the time. What is going on? When is it going to happen? And so we're counting down to the moment that the broadcast will start at 9 a.m. So Saturday morning, 9 a.m. rolls around, and what I'm seeing on my screen in front of me is this and it's on the far left of the screen in this picture, but it's a gray window that just has probably 100 different entries, and it's almost like a spreadsheet, like a single column spreadsheet, and each entry is just a couple of minutes. And it represents, what I have programmed into OBS as, from 9 o'clock to 9:05, we're going to see this on the screen. From 9:06 to 9:08, we're going to see this on the screen. Every minute was accounted for. And you think, oh, well, doesn't that mean that it's going to be really inflexible? You're going to have a problem. What if there's a contingency? Oh, we had some contingencies, my friend, believe me. But we planned that in. So we had things that were fixed. They were we called them like nails, where like we had like things that were just nailed into the schedule. They were not going to move. And those were primarily the presentations. So you go into YouTube now and you can still see those presentations. We had other things that were flexible, and they were like us chatting, or length of Q&A time, or we had some quote unquote advertisements from sponsors, or we had some behind the scenes video. And so, all day what I'm doing is I'm just watching the clock. I'm watching the pre-loaded items that we have, the entries that we have, and I'm switching around at the same time. Okay, so that's going out over YouTube. I'm pushing that out. At the same time, I've got a Zoom screen. You can see it in this picture there on the right. And the Zoom screen, the Zoom call is all of the MCs. And then whoever is our next presenter would also probably be in there as well. And those folks then are, I would bring them up, and I would literally be kind of screen grabbing each one of their images and placing it on the screen. And it looked great, but it was just a lot of complexity to make sure that everybody was in the Zoom call at the right time. And I would be able to talk with them. The nice thing is their audio, when they were being broadcast, the audience could hear it on YouTube. I could speak to them and they would hear me in the Zoom call, but that was not audible in YouTube. So it allowed me to be basically a control booth.
Yeah, and that was really important because, speaking as one of the people that was talking live, it was very good to know that Ethan could jump in there and say, we've got 30 seconds left, or or stretch it out longer, or whatever it might be.
And I was constantly saying stuff like that. I'd be like, you're live in 5, 4, 3. Like, it really was like a control booth in a TV studio.
Yeah.
And if you'd like, I have a screenshot of OBS with the stuff on the side. If you want to have that shown, or I'll take over your share real quick.
Yeah, here, let me stop for a sec.
So here we go. You should see it's just a a not 100% accurate screenshot, but it's got the stuff on the side. So if you want to talk over that at all?
Yeah. So you can see like each item on the left, it's gonna be a little hard to see maybe, but we've got basically like there's a time code. And in fact, what we should probably show at this point is the spreadsheet as well. We'll just bring that up really quickly here. But
Sure.
there's a time code, which is the time that it's actually going to start. And Ian, I don't know, do you have that spreadsheet while I'm talking through this? Maybe you can.
Yeah, talk through it and
that.
I'll grab it.
Okay. So each one of these items has a code. So it's like B02 Saturday 901 live MC welcome, and then it has some names. And like the degree, like this is the level of planning that you need to do, I think, to really pull something like this off. Again, this is like each block of time gets a code, and we would then be able to refer to these codes. Now, why do we have these little codes? B09, B10, B11. The reason that we had those little codes was so that I could say to Tim, I'm moving B17, and it's now going to start at 12:18, right? Times change. So this is part of our contingency planning. But each item in the schedule, even if the time changed, the code remained the same. So this is a little bit like when you're doing ham radio messaging, like ICS messaging, you have a message code, you have a message ID. This is the same idea. A lot of ICS principles were applied throughout this in areas you might not expect it. So, Ian, do you want to switch over to that, or should we just move on? Oh, there we go. This was the spreadsheet. This was shared with all of the MCs. And basically every item here, this is a separate entry during the day. So conference schedule overview, general chat, moving into a presentation, pre-roll, just every minute. So, this was like fly by the seat of your pants live, but it was all prepared and scheduled ahead of time, just like you would do in a TV studio.
Yeah, it's very orchestrated, I would say.
Yeah, that's the right word.
Yeah, and this was also the interface that the MCs could use, so they could see like Tim could go here, select a filter, and now he only sees his schedule that he needs to be concerned about. So you could maintain that situational awareness, but not have the confusion of the admittedly large schedule that is there that contains everything.
And Ian plugged using Google Sheets and all the Google property tools throughout this whole project. This is an example. So this is just a spreadsheet, quote unquote, just a spreadsheet, but it's a shared Google spreadsheet, and this is our single source of truth. Right. So because we had a single document that everybody knew was consistent and always updated by me, and that they could go in and do that filtering like Ian just demonstrated, we had this was really much more than just a spreadsheet. This was a tool. This was sort of the beating heart of the operation.
Yep. We all lived in that thing.
Yeah.
All right. Tim, you've got
control. How are we doing on time?
I think we should probably be bringing it in for a landing.
Yeah, we're at 51 after.
Okay. So I think I need to, I need to escape out of the presentation mode again, I think, to be able to actually present it. So sorry, bear with me just a sec.
And if people have questions, definitely feel free to throw them in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like our event, you don't have to wait until the end.
Yeah. Okay, so some quick stats. Well, we reached and surpassed our goal of 500 people fairly early on, but in the end, we had close to 4,000 people register. The live viewership was lower than that, as we expected, but it was we had around 1,400 people fairly steadily on Saturday. Dropped off a little bit on Sunday, but again, it was fairly steady throughout that day. And then this third bullet, I think this is way, way, way low, right? Like, what's our unique views count? Do we know what it is roughly right now?
Oh, right now, I don't know. It is definitely higher than that.
I remember seeing like 17,000 or at some point, not
yeah.
long ago.
Yeah, I'll check if you want to keep talking through it.
So that's all right. Point is, we certainly were able to reach a lot of folks. We had among the registrations, there were over 40 countries represented, and then during the event, several times, I or one of the other MCs would say, "Hey, put in the chat where you're watching us from." And so we'd see those roll in, and it was that was really fun because there were folks from all over the world, and certainly in the U.S. and Canada, like coast to coast, was represented. And as far as the U.S., Hawaii was there, Alaska was there, so it was really fun to see the reach of the whole thing. So with all of that, we wound up really quite pleased, but we're hams, we're nerds, we're emergency comms people. Of course we have an after action report and a review of that report, and we're looking at what do we do from here? How do we make it better next year? What did we learn? What went well, what didn't go as well, et cetera. So Catherine, can you talk a little bit about this, as well as any of the planning work that we haven't, spent probably enough time on today?
Sure. No, we, as a few of you have mentioned, we wanted to utilize the principles of ICS and NIMS generally for planning and executing on this event. So we used the managing by objectives, the strategic planning with our incident action plans. We utilize a lot of the different features of those systems to really contribute to the success of the event. So within the pre-event phase, we had like an event plan, we had an evaluation plan, we had a event action plan for both the live event and the live audience test that we did. So we did a lot of planning to make sure that we were capturing all the different facets, all those contingencies, and then that we could evaluate it clearly afterwards to learn from those lessons. And part of the evaluation plan was working towards this after action review, so an after action report. And the report ended up being 40 pages long. We have 80 recommendations. Some of those are to do what we did again because it worked, and some are to do it a little differently because we felt like we could do it better next time. So it was a big learning opportunity, and there's a lot of thought-provoking material in there for our steering committee to think about how they can take Comm Academy and grow it in new directions and really capture this new audience that we've found.
Great, thank you, Catherine. So I think with that, we can go into any questions that folks have. That's all we've got for slideware.
Ian, how long is that video you referred to?
Yeah, so the video is not too long. It's just like 3 minutes or so. The behind the scenes.
I just put it in a chat. If you look for the chat that says "whoops, better link," you'll see that's the optimal link for the behind the scenes video, and I also dropped in the link to our channel.
Okay,
the main playlist. So sure.
If you want to run the video now, you can.
Well, I think it's 8 minutes.
Oh, is it 8 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
Just quick. That's okay. We have time.
All right.
Come on. You want to drive that, Ethan, and give it a shot?
Sure. Let's see what happens.
We'll do it live.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm going to try to share this here. Let's see. Share advanced video, and let's see what happens.
Your success precedes you, so I anticipate no issues.
Oh boy, yeah. I hope we have failover here, Ian.
Yeah.
Comm Academy, and let's take. I'm just literally digging into all of the original exports that I did for the.
Meanwhile, while you're working on that, so Tom W3TDH had the question: will the Comm Academy be virtual and eyeball next year? So we don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. That's one of the that's the huge question for all of us, but we think it's probably going to be some combination of live and virtual next year, but stay tuned basically.
Anybody seeing anything here? Video's up on share, I think.
I'm seeing.
Perfect.
Okay.
You're good.
And I'm going to play it. I hope the audio levels are okay for everybody. So you might want to adjust your levels if need be as we play. And again, just in the beginning of this video, just watch the little like funny little animations and like all this, the color grading on this video, all the stock footage, like everything here from scratch to produce this conference. Hi, I'm Ethan Schoonover, and I'm one of the volunteers working to run this year's Comm Academy 2021. I'm working as the 2021 Operations Section Chief, and I work closely with Ian Gallagher, Logistics Chief, Catherine Middleton, Planning Chief, and our PIO, Tim Helming, to also form the core production team. We thought it might be interesting for you to see some of the behind-the-scenes setup and how things run 100% remotely with a fully distributed team and remote guests. We've been working on this since October 2020, so what you're seeing is the culmination of 6 months of planning and production. I'm responsible for most of the designed assets, including graphic design and video production, and I'm also running the live broadcast from my home studio. So let's take a look at where I'm operating right now and what things look like from my end. This is my primary home studio. A couple floors above me is another workspace where I do most of the video editing and asset production for the conference. We've edited a lot of video for this event to make the jobs of the MCs and guests go as smoothly as possible. I sit here at the main desk and monitor several views. We have multiple monitors, each showing different useful views, including the live video conference with the MCs and guests, our minute-by-minute production schedule, and the live stream control software. While I have a full video studio set up here with a softbox, camera, teleprompter, and ceiling and table-mounted mics, I'm not going on the air directly for this event. I'm acting as essentially a 100% remote live video production studio. I coordinate and cue the on-air talent and video assets that we have ready to roll at any given moment, all from this location. This year, we opted to pre-record speaker presentations and then bring them in live afterward. This mitigates some risk during a live streaming event and gives the speakers a chance to review the live questions coming in from the audience as their presentation is broadcast. Initially, we tested Zoom for this recording. While we are still using Zoom for the live components of our event, including Q&A and anytime MCs are on the air, we found the video quality wasn't quite up to what we wanted. We ended up using another recording system with the presenters that allowed us to capture their video locally. This worked beautifully and was an overall seamless experience for the speakers. While I'm broadcasting the conference, I'm monitoring several different audio feeds, including one coming into my location from the Zoom call with the MCs and guests, and another audio feed going out to the live stream. The Zoom conference audio is sent to in-wall speakers in front of me, and audio from the live stream videos is sent to speakers in-wall behind me, so I have an ambient awareness of all the audio going out. This broadcast stream audio is simultaneously routed at a lower volume back into the Zoom conference, along with a live video feed of the stream. We're using a dedicated hardware mixer to achieve this. This lets everyone stay focused in the Zoom call and gives them a clear sense of when they are on and off the air. Video from the Zoom conference is captured and cropped into multiple views for layout in our composited scenes. These are backed by looping videos and then overlaid with lower thirds and information crawls. We're using an open source application called OBS, or Open Broadcaster Software. While there is some learning curve, it is incredibly powerful. You can see here that we preload all the content in templated scenes that are subsequently used throughout the event. We have time-coded scenes that allow us to progress seamlessly step by step through the event sections that we've planned out. This pre-planning actually allows us to be flexible and accommodate some variance in the schedule. During the event, I can speak to the team on the Zoom call without my voice going out on the air. This allows me to cue them verbally as necessary, much like you do on a live TV studio set. Additionally, we have Slack set up as a chat space for us to coordinate. All this just scratches the surface of the complexity involved in getting this all running smoothly. And of course, one major consideration is what happens if I lose connectivity here at this site. We've planned for that. I'll turn things over to my colleague and logistics chief, Ian Gallagher, who can talk more about our disaster failover plans and his own equipment setup.
Hi, I'm Ian Gallagher. I'm the Logistics Section Chief for Comm Academy 2021. Now, in addition to running the logistics section, which is responsible for managing all of the technology stacks like the website, the scheduling platform, Eventbrite, and our chat systems, basically all the things that you interact with as a participant over the internet, I'm also helping out the operations section, which is led by Ethan Schoonover. Now, in Comm Academy, the operations section is primarily responsible for our broadcasting setup. So that means all the aspects of getting video content delivered to you, the participant. So while logistics handles the kind of technical backend stuff, operations is responsible for the actual video content. So all of the video has been cut, produced, post-processed by primarily Ethan and his team. Now, I'm helping as a failover capacity for him as well. So Ethan has gone over his setup where he has his entire broadcast studio set up ready to stream to YouTube. And I have almost all of that replicated here at my location as well. Now, the reason we did that is because we wanted to have a nice fault-tolerant system in place so that the participants can have uninterrupted access to Comm Academy throughout the weekend. It'd be pretty silly to have a disaster readiness conference and not actually plan for disaster on our own, right? So I'm going to actually go ahead and give you a little tour of my setup. If you've seen Ethan's setup, you're going to see a lot of similar components. Hope you're enjoying the event. All right, let's just cover some of the components of my setup here. So front and center, nice big monitor, and that's hooked up to my personal Mac laptop. That's where I do most of the logistics works for Comm Academy. And to the right, we have an iPad as well as an audio mixer. Now, the iPad I will be using during the day of to actually monitor the YouTube stream, make sure that the content that we're putting out there is perfect. So replicating exactly what all of you as participants will be seeing. Now, to the left, we have a few additional displays. The larger display leftmost there is connected to a Windows PC, and that is primarily running the piece of software called OBS Studio. Ethan and I will both be running a copy of this during the event. Ethan will be sending his stream out to what YouTube refers as their primary ingestion point, and I will be sending another stream to the backup or secondary ingestion point. Now, what that means is if Ethan loses connectivity for any reason, his computer crashes, anything happens where he no longer can stream out to YouTube, I already have a connection to their backup point, and YouTube will automatically and instantly switch over to the signal that I am sending. That gives us then a few minutes to sort out whatever the problem may be. And when Ethan is working on sorting out his issue, I can take over and I have all of the content here to send as well. So I can pick up exactly where he was and start on the presentation that was up next, or we can cut to MCs for live discussion and the like. Now, in addition to what you see here, another big component that is important here is having good, reliable power and internet connectivity. So I have all of my equipment on UPSs to provide uninterruptible power in case of any issues in that regard. And I also have a pretty robust network here with 3 commercial internet connections. So if, say, CenturyLink's fiber goes out, I can still fail over to a Comcast DOCSIS cable connection. And if both of those happen to somehow go out, I still have a T-Mobile LTE connection. So we have taken some pretty good considerations for disaster readiness and continuity here. And let's hope we don't have to use them, but it was fun to engineer and get everything working. So hope you enjoy the event. Have a good one.
All right. Wow. That was a lot of work, man.
A little bit. Yeah, it's always fun to listen to yourself talk. And
Yep.
yeah, we put a lot of energy into this. It was great.
Yeah, so that's what we have for today. So, we can certainly open things up to questions.
Very professionally done. Thank you very much. You can see the work and you can see the pride in you guys seeing the results of it.
I don't think you guys have enough monitors.
You never do.
Yeah, you're joking, but it's really true. So I know, day of, I was scrambling to stick another monitor on. So
Yep.
You know what's also funny is in addition to monitors, you never have enough ways to monitor audio. Audio is 100 times more hard than the video.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
I didn't see any hands up. I was making sure we don't have any questions there in the chat.
We're good.
Go ahead there, Ian. Yeah, Ethan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it's funny. You would think that since we were interviewing all ham radio operators and, MCOM folks, that everybody would have amazing microphones. But if I had to do this over again, which I may, as long as these other three folks do it with me, because they were great to work with. But if there was one thing I would do differently next year, we have a couple, short list of these things. It would be making sure everybody had a good mic. Definitely audio. Ham radio operators have great mics on their radios, but they have terrible mics on their computers quite often.
Yeah, one of the things that we initially thought about proposing was, if we could do a safe, socially distant studio recording in the Seattle area, but we opted just not to offer that because logistically it was complicated with the COVID situation. Still, we didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable, and it would have a drastically different effect for anyone who couldn't attend to record in that manner as well.
I agree with Tim's comment in the chat that there are probably some moderate-sized cities that have less connectivity than Ian has.
I know it to be true. Yep.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. You plan ahead for disaster, just in case, because you guys didn't have any failovers that you talked about. But I've seen live broadcasts that have, and you got to plan for it.
Yeah, so that's actually that's pretty fun. The only failures that happened, Ethan and I are the only people who know about them. There were like 3 times when some little hiccups happened, but as a participant and a viewer, we're pretty sure that those were never visible. So.
Well, we did have one issue where one speaker was not able to be present for his Q&A session. So there was some creative chatting by our MCs and sharing of Ethan and Ian's video, and so we managed to make that work. It was not a disaster situation in the end.
Right. Yeah, we had a handful of the videos like the behind the scenes video and the ICS video, and a few others that we could really kind of queue up at any moment if we had to fill some time, and that worked great. And it's also content that people really enjoyed, and it wasn't a problem to just show it multiple times. So.
Okay.
Oh, I like Steve's suggestion there. A mic kit in a Pelican case that could be sent to the speakers. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that could help.
Yeah, sure. No. Actually, Steve, we really thought about should we, is sending a camera a thing that we should do? And, definitely there's an argument to be made for doing that. Assuming that you can get that, recoup that cost or equipment.
Yeah, that's also something that we actually haven't talked about, and I think people have a lot of assumptions about how much it costs to do something like this, and we did it on easily something defined as a shoestring budget. Not really necessarily because we had to, but because we were able to. But I know other events have, they put lots of money into this, and I don't know if Catherine, I don't have any problem sharing ballpark money numbers here. I mean, we spent under $2,000 for everything. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that
100 of that was feeding our staff.
That by itself is very impressive.
Now, does that assume that you have all your equipment, your hardware
Yes.
already there?
Right. So yeah, the event was lucky to have, honestly, Ethan to start with this because he had a lot of this production equipment already. And then it got me really intrigued and I needed another hobby. So now I have a bunch of this equipment.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if you had to buy some of these things new, the cost is not substantial. And if you were going to plan on having an event recurring, or especially if you started to do it more than once a year, it can really be, worthwhile.
Yeah. No, the bigger cost was a time cost for us. It was really this is just hundreds and hundreds of hours of work.
And it showed. Thank you guys. It was amazing.
Excellent. Thank you.
Marty speaks for us all there. One of the things in doing these presentations I have noticed is we have more problems with audio than we do with video. We do have occasional visual, but it's the audio. One particular event we had was for section managers, and one particular section manager had all these microphones, and finally, but he couldn't make it. He was having fun. I says, just stand by your mailbox for a couple of days. You'll get. I sent him a $16 USB microphone to plug in, and he was 100% better. And he spent all this money on these other microphones. So we kind of joke about that now, but audio is a big factor.
Yeah. Boy, I mean, I just wish that you could go back in time and hear Ian and I I mean, we spent just hours and hours and hours testing our own audio, testing audio routing, like, routing all this audio around. Like, you think, like, as ham radio operators, we think, oh yeah, we could figure that out. And that's kind of how we went into it. We were thinking, yeah, no problem. But if you throw a couple computers into the mix and a couple different software applications, it gets real hairy.
Yeah. And that goes, exactly what Ethan just said there. It goes for me too. I thought, okay, yeah, you say it's hard and whatever, but like, I get it. And I put off setting up the audio routing for the failover stuff until, 3 or 4 days before we had to test that. And I kicked myself because it is very complicated to keep that mental map. And we had to make diagrams. We had to actually make, actual diagrams to remind ourselves. And I literally labeled everything. All of my cables have labels on them for the event specifically, because it was so complicated. And
keep in mind, everybody, we're targeting -6 dB. We're targeting a very specific audio level because you need to be, for broadcast, right? We're broadcasting on YouTube. You need all the audio, and that means every variable mic from every variable presenter and MC and 3 different folks in 3 different rooms, all with different audio qualities. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah,
and I have a question. I noticed all your speakers, I think, were very well spoken. Nobody really fumbled their presentations. Did you do a lot of review of those things ahead of time and decide if there were any that needed to be weeded out, or did you just get really lucky?
So much editing.
Yeah. We had great presenters. Absolutely agreed. Yes, they were great presenters, but I spent 6 hours at least per video editing out, trimming here and there, trimming ums and ahs and things like that. So
dog barking.
Yep. But they're good for the most part. They know their subject, and it wasn't that we got lucky. I don't want to say that, because that's actually one area where what we could call sort of the old guard of Comm Academy came into play, and they helped source a lot of these presenters. And I think one of the things we'd like to do next year is also start to open things up and get a more diverse crowd in. Really, I feel like that's one area that all 4 of us feel very strongly about, that we'd like to see greater diversity in our.
I just want to mention one of the biggest attractions, or a couple of the biggest attractions, were the folks you had from the professional emergency management community. Their talks, at least to me, were the most eye-opening. A lot of the things I heard from the hams were really interesting, but you could see that, and it's something that made sense to you already, but you got a very different perspective from the folks whose job is not radio. Their job is emergency management and the big picture stuff. So that was, to me at least, a big hit. And from all the folks I spoke with down here in Southern California, they agreed with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Tim, you want to take that?
No, I was just I was just saying I agree. Like Tom Cox, he was fantastic. He was, it was.
I was going to say one thing kind of on that subject that surprised us a little bit, actually, was since we ended up doing a lot of promotion in the amateur radio community, we actually got a lot of people who thought that there was not enough amateur radio content. And that wasn't really, the intent of the conference. It is primarily emergency management and emergency communications. But we didn't think about that as much ahead of time. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And so we could be a little bit more concise on, saying what the event is, to make sure that people have those right expectations. Or we can just have, we can bring in more amateur radio content too, because that means we have an audience that is interested in that too.
Sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
Sorry, I was going to say, with the return to multiple tracks, we hope in upcoming events it will be easier to flag really the focus area of each presentation, so that attendees can really pick the presentations that are the most interesting to them. Yeah, it'll be amazing to be able to have the amateur radio track and the hardware workshop track and the emergency management track, stuff like that.
New things to work out, new challenges ahead.
Yep.
What I am seeing here, just amongst the 4 of you, and I'm sure it's everybody, but the enthusiasm and cooperation and the teamwork. I mean, it shows right here. Just you guys have worked obviously did a lot of hours together and are very comfortable with working with each other.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I would work with these three folks again in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Such a great experience with all of you.
Yep.
A little bit on how this works. Sometimes the particular Zoom license we have, I should say, is for 500. We have exceeded that well, I won't say many times, but we have exceeded that at times. And I bumped it up to 1,000 a couple of times. Often we have a lower showing, but what happens is our videos, I'm recording this, goes out. It goes out to a very large group. And we're now also because the Japanese has taken interest in this, and they asked that we put it on YouTube as well, because YouTube they can translate, and so we're doing that as well. So I used to be very disappointed when I saw low numbers, and that isn't how it works. It depends upon this, what's going on in the world and everything else. But we see people getting into our videos numerous times now, both on YouTube and then on our normal site, as you will see. Well, I hope that we can maybe have you guys back when you're ready to go again, and keep in touch with us.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Tim, if I can ask you, could you send me your presentation afterwards, and so I can get it out there? What we do is I put that out there as a document that people watching this can follow along.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
No problem.
Anybody else got anything?
You mentioned, so you archive the videos, of course, and you're going to start putting them on your YouTube channel. Is there any interest in us having it on the Comm Academy channel, or we might be able to? I'm not sure what the options are for kind of linking to other people's channels there. I know you can do a channel partnership, but I'm not sure if that's quite what we would want here.
Okay.
On the technical side, I'm not sure.
Right now, both our videos, I make them so they're downloadable, so they can download them and for their editing, because they're pretty raw. Okay, right. And to be used, then you're welcome to do that. If there's anything that we can do sidewise, if you got some ideas, we're open to that. That's great.
Well, we'd be happy to link back to your channel, and you can link back to ours, and it's a whole cross-promotional thing.
Yes, I like this. I like this a lot.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate your time and the great presentation you've done. Is there any more questions out there?
Nothing in the chat, Dan.
Okay, anybody got any comments?
Just a comment from Dennis here.
Okay.
And I wanted to thank the folks from Comm Academy for joining us tonight. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
It was
our pleasure.
I really appreciate you getting back with us and doing this. You did a great job. And I'm still in awe over your production. It's just amazing. So,
Well, we knew they wouldn't have mic fright anyway.
Yeah, that's the least of our worries at this point. I'll tell you what,
Look forward to next year.
Excellent. Yeah, us too.
All righty.
Thank you guys, and thank everybody for coming and sticking it out.
Yes, and Marty, I appreciate your comments also. You had a lot of good input there during this presentation. Okay, I'm going to pull the plug, say 73s, everyone. Hope to see you all someplace again.
Everybody stay
Good
well.
night, all.
So long.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
73.